how do you not see the connection? That really, I think, is an important question.
It's distressing for a Protestant to go into a cathedral or a church and see the altar to Mary ablaze with a forest of candles, and another altar where Jesus is pictured has hardly any candles in front of it where prayers are offered. It does seem, in practice many times, a kind of Mariolatry does occur. Yeah.
But that its foundation is in the teachings of the Pope and in the dogmas of the Church. That's not some aberration. I've got to hope that Dr. Craig has never read the Glories of Mary. Because if he were to read the Glories of Mary, he would not speak like this. Well, he could not speak like this, honestly. What Rome does, what you see in the practice, flows directly from the teaching of the Church. There is no inconsistency here. None.
In Mexico, there's that kind of an image of a very vigorous Mary, exalted, arms outstretched, very much alive. But then the crucifix has the crucified, beaten Savior. And so Jesus is not seen as vigorous and alive as Mary, just in the statuary and so on.
Right, and for the average peasant, so often it will be Mary that he approaches in prayer and seeks help and succor from instead of Christ. And she really does, in, again, practice, I think.
And in theology. And in the teaching of the popes, who have repeated these very things. What was John Paul II's motto, Dr. Craig? Do you know? You should know if you're going to be addressing these things in a public format as an expert. What was his personal motto? Totus tuus. Totally yours, right? That's only part of it. Totus tuus su Mariae. To Mary. Totally yours. That was his motto. He taught that she was advocate, mediatrix. He taught these things. So don't tell me that peasant seems to understand the official teachings of Rome better than you do. Maybe you should stop hanging out with the westernized clerics and maybe read some Roman Catholic literature.
Preempt the role of Christ. So this would be kind of the mirror image of what I was saying before, where sometimes practicing Catholics' attitude toward justification is better than the doctrine. In this case, I think the doctrine is better than the practice many times. The doctrine of the Church is very clear that it doesn't worship Mary or think of her as on a par with Jesus.
Total ignorance. I'm sorry, but here, it's not in paper print anymore, but it's still available electronically. Mary, Another Redeemer. It's not long. Well documented, straight from Roman Catholic sources, and I would recommend it to Dr. Craig's reading.
But in popular Catholic piety, sometimes it seems that line is crossed.
In conclusion today, Dr. Craig, if you were to sit down, have coffee with a person of the Catholic faith, what would be your approach with them? What would you want to know, find out?
I think I'd want to know whether or not that person has a vital relationship with Christ, or whether or not this...
How about whether that vital relationship is mediated through the sacraments of the Church and through the propitiatory sacrifice of the Mass? There are Roman Catholics watching this going, he knows what the issues are. He knows what the issues are. Yeah, I do. Vast majority of other folks are just flitting around on the surface. But yeah, that's the issue, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Sure is. Sure is.
Person has simply been raised in the Church, and this is a kind of pro forma religion that hasn't really resulted in a regenerate heart. And that may be difficult to discern, but I do think that that's the bottom line. Catholics that I've talked to that are clearly born-again believers will readily say the Catholic Church needs to be evangelized. And they will admit this right from the beginning, that the Church is in need of evangelization. And so I think...
By the way, yes, they will mean, but what they mean by evangelization and what we mean by evangelization are not the same thing. If you spend an hour listening to EWTN, you will hear that term evangelization. And there's the problem, is you're redefining it in your Protestant mind to mean something completely different than what it is understood in the Roman Catholic mind. And, two ships passing the night here, definitions, same words, different definitions.
It's the most important thing to try to discern is whether this person we're speaking with is someone who really knows Christ and is a regenerate Christian or not. If not, then we want to try to help that person to make that commitment and move the knowledge from the head to the heart.
Well, there you go. Of course, I would ask, even at that very end, and would you direct them back to their Roman Catholic Church where they've been at but never heard the gospel? That's part of the question. Vitally important issues, folks. I hope you've listened. And I know there could be all sorts of, White's attacking Craig again, he's just jealous and blah, 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 blah. Key issues. Theology matters. And here it is illustrated to the nth degree. To the nth degree. It truly, truly does. All right. Now we've gone jumbo length. I wanted to go there first because it is so vitally important. And I want this program to be useful to people. And so I did not want to make them have to skip into the program someplace to get to that discussion of Roman Catholicism. But I do need to spend a few minutes. We won't go the full mega size, but 10, 15 minutes to talk about anti-Calvinist derangement syndrome. That's a somewhat funny, but sadly often just far too accurate acronym to describe the outrageous behavior that opposition to the Reformed faith can sometimes produce in men and women, unfortunately. Often on the web, of course, but in real life as well. On Friday of last week, I flew to California, ostensibly to engage in a debate with Pastor Steve Tassi of the Calvary Chapel Missions Church in Norwalk. On Thursday of last week, I did a program